The lawyer slides a manila envelope across the table, and my sister Renata doesn't touch it. She's looking at the painting on the wall instead. A watercolor of the Kars Plateau my father bought at a market stall in Ljubljana in 1987. She knows every brushstroke of that painting. She grew up beneath it. The lawyer clears his throat. Renata still doesn't touch the envelope. She looks at me. I look at her. And in that room, with 4 attorneys and a paralegal and my brother-in-law's hands flat on the table, and my mother's second husband sitting very, very still, I say quietly, "Go ahead. Open it." She does. The number on the first page is $31,400,000. And the name on the document is not Renata's. Welcome to Calm Revenge Tales. This channel is for people who waited, who kept their mouths shut and their records clean and their conscience clear, even when it cost them. If that's you, subscribe. Because justice in this story doesn't arrive loud. It arrives the way my father taught me to do everything. Late, precise, and already done. My name is Teodora Vasics. I am a forensic accountant. I have been one for 22 years. And I say that not to impress you but to explain why none of what follows surprised me. I work in the language of hidden things. Accounts within accounts. Structures inside structures. I find money people believed was unfindable. And I testify about what I find in rooms where lying is illegal. I was good at it before my parents died. I became exceptional at it after. The person this story is really about is my Aunt Margaret, my father's younger sister. She was 63 years old when our story begins, and she had lived with my parents for 31 of those years, since the car accident that took her husband and left her with a limp and a grief she never discussed. She cooked. She maintained the house. She drove my mother to chemotherapy, twice a week for 14 months, without once being offered reimbursement for fuel. I paid for the fuel. I paid for it without telling either of them because the point was not the money. The point was that Margaret deserved not to be worn down. My parents loved Margaret the way you love furniture you've stopped seeing. My sister Renata treated her like staff. I treated her like she was the only honest person in that family. Because she was. The dinner was my mother's idea, which meant it was Renata's idea. My mother called it a family reconciliation dinner, which was a phrase she had not used in the 12 years since Renata and I last spoke directly. Renata had 3 conditions, relayed through my mother in a voice message I still have. I was not to bring my partner. I was not to mention my work. And I was not to speak to Margaret about finances. That 3rd condition told me everything I needed to know. I went anyway. Margaret asked me to come. She called me on a Tuesday morning, and I could hear her standing in the kitchen. I knew by the particular echo off the old stone tile, and she said, "Teddy, come to dinner. I need you to see something." That was all. I wrote it down in my notebook. The date. The time. The exact words. I arrived at the house in Buc, the family home, a 1930s villa with a clay tile roof and a walnut tree in the back garden, on a Saturday in late October. Renata was already there with her husband Chaba and their 2 adult children. My mother sat at the head of the table she'd sat at for 40 years. Margaret moved between kitchen and dining room carrying dishes neither Renata nor Chaba acknowledged receiving. Renata embraced me at the door with the warmth of someone performing an embrace. She smelled like perfume and contingency. Her husband shook my hand without meeting my eyes. One of her sons looked up from his phone briefly, and then looked back down. The walnut tree outside the window had dropped its leaves. The branches were bare and exact against the gray sky, like a signature on a pale document. Over the soup, Margaret had made goulias with proper beef shank, the kind that takes 4 hours. My mother mentioned in passing that she'd updated a few things with the family estate lawyer. She said it between 2 other sentences, the way you bury a clause in a contract. Renata refilled her own wine glass. Chaba nodded once. Margaret stood in the doorway between the kitchen and the dining room holding a bread basket and watching me. I ate the goulias. It was perfect. It was always perfect. The breaking point came after dessert. My mother asked Margit to clear the table. Margit set down the bread basket and began to collect plates. Renata said, without looking up, "While you're at it, you can pack up the blue china. I'm taking it to Budapest next week." The blue china was Margit's. Her mother had given it to her. When Margit moved into the house after the accident, she brought almost nothing. She brought the china. Margit's hands went still over the stack of plates. "That china belongs to me," she said. Renata looked up for the first time. "Everything in this house belongs to the estate. And the estate is being managed now." My mother said nothing. She looked at the tablecloth. "That is not true," Margit said. Her voice was level. "I have the provenance documentation. My mother purchased it in Vienna in 1961. "Then you can submit a claim," Renata said. "Through the proper channels." Csaba looked out the window. One of the sons shifted in his chair. The other one found something interesting on the ceiling. I said, "Renata." She looked at me with an expression I recognized. The particular arrangement of a face that is preparing to pretend it has been wronged. "Don't," she said. "You don't have a seat at this table." I said, "The table is where you're sitting, not where you're from." She said, "You've been excluded from the estate. You know that." Mother made her wishes clear. I stood up. I folded my napkin. I set it on the plate precisely. I said, "Margit, get your coat." Margit looked at me. She nodded once. She went to the hallway. One of Renata's sons opened his mouth. His father put a hand on his arm. The son closed his mouth. We left. I drove. Margit sat with her hands folded in her lap, looking at the road. After about 10 minutes she said, "You didn't finish the gulius." "I had enough," I said. She nodded. Outside, the fields were dark. We moved Margit's things out on a Thursday. Irantaban. We took 4 hours and made 2 trips. Everything she owned fit into a 2-bedroom apartment in Szombathely that I'd found 3 weeks earlier, before the dinner, because I had already understood what that dinner was going to be. I paid the first year's rent. She didn't argue. She'd learned, over time, that arguing with me about money was like arguing with a river about direction. My own adjustment was minor by comparison. I was already supporting myself without attachment to any family asset. I had never borrowed from my parents, never taken a share, never been named in a document that mattered. Renata got the house. Renata got the accounts, documented, declared, and totaling approximately 840,000 euros after costs. The will was legal. I had read it and had it read independently. It was airtight on what it said. What it said was that I received nothing. I was fine with this. I am a forensic accountant. I know the difference between what is in a document and what is true. The mystery object arrived 6 weeks after the funeral. A thin, padded envelope in my mailbox, addressed in my father's handwriting, which I recognized immediately, though he had died 3 months before it arrived. The postmark was from his lawyer's office. Inside was a single brass key, old-fashioned, the kind that fits a safety deposit box, and a folded index card that said only, Raiffeisen Vesprem branch. Her name is on it too. I put the key in the inside pocket of my winter coat. I didn't go to Vesprem that week. I went to see Margit instead. She had arranged her apartment with the economy of someone who had lived small before and knew how to make a small space feel solid. The blue china was on a shelf she had built herself, badly but standing. I looked at it. She watched me look at it. "Renata called," she said. "She wants me to sign something." "Don't." "I know." She paused. "I already called my own lawyer." She'd had a lawyer for 6 years, it turned out. She'd paid him quarterly. I found this so unexpectedly wonderful that I had to look at the window. She made me tea. Parat kostea apricot. She had a jar of her own jam on the counter, the kind she made every August from the walnut tree gardens neighboring apricot trees, the ones she had tended for 30 years. She gave me a jar to take home. I still have it. It is the only jar I haven't opened. Renata's second call came in January. She offered me 8% of the declared estate, approximately 67,000 euros, in exchange for signing a document releasing any future claims. Through my own attorney, I declined. Her third call came in February. She asked if I'd found anything in my father's personal effects. Her voice was controlled and her phrasing was careful. I said I had not found anything relevant. This was technically accurate at the time I said it. I still hadn't been to Veszprém. I kept touching the key in my coat pocket on the drive home. Through the fabric it felt the same temperature as everything else, which is what ordinary objects feel like before you understand what they are. If you're watching this and wondering how a story like this ends, subscribe right now so the rest finds you. Because where we're going, the numbers are very specific and the silence has been a very long time coming. Margit had a stroke in March. A small one, the doctors said. She was in the hospital for 11 days. I was there every day except 2, when I was in Veszprém. She recovered almost completely. A small stutter in her left hand. She said it didn't affect her cooking. She died in September. 7 months later. Not from the stroke, from a cancer that had been quiet for years and chose that autumn to be loud. She was in the hospital for the last 3 weeks. I slept in the chair beside her bed more nights than I counted. On the second to last night she held my hand and said, "The key is for both of us. It always was." I said, "I know." She said, "He was proud of you." He was bad at saying it. I did not answer that one. Her final words to me, the last morning, were very simple. She said, "Make it count." I sat with her until the end. Then I drove to a diner on the main road, ordered coffee and a kifli, and sat at the counter for 1 hour without speaking. Then I went to work. The Raiffeisen branch in Veszprém had a pleasant manager named Benz who verified my identification and my authorization documentation. I had in those months been meticulous, and led me to the vault. The safety deposit box was registered in 2 names, my father's and Margit's. Not mine. Not Renata's. Inside was a secondary key, a handwritten letter from my father dated 4 years before his death, and the access credentials for a Luxembourg fiduciary account. I sat in that vault room for 40 minutes reading everything twice. My father had, over 30 years of strategic consulting work in Central European privatization, accumulated a separate asset structure entirely outside his declared estate. The structure was legal, meticulously, deliberately, exhaustingly legal. He had retained a fiduciary firm in Luxembourg, established a trust with 2 beneficiaries, and named a trustee executor with instructions to release documentation 1 year after both his death and Margit's death, or immediately upon the beneficiaries presenting the physical key. The total value of the trust, $31,400,000. The 2 beneficiaries, Margit Vasix-Horvath and Teodora Vasix. Since Margit had predeceased me without having accessed the trust, her share passed, per the trust document, entirely to me. I scheduled the disclosure meeting myself. I booked the conference room. I invited Renata, Chaba, their estate attorney, and the family lawyer who had handled the declared estate. My own attorney sat beside me. I placed the brass key on the table in front of me when I sat down. No one in that room knew what it was yet. The Luxembourg trustee's representative opened the proceedings. He was precise and unhurried. He explained the trust structure, the legal history, the valuation. He named the amount twice, in both euros and dollars, so there would be no ambiguity. Renata said, "That's not possible." The representative said, "I assure you it is." Renata said louder, "He would have told me." Her husband's hands went flat on the table. Her estate attorney looked at the ceiling. One of her sons, the older one, the one who had almost spoken at the dinner table years ago, went visibly pale. I watched his jaw set and I recognized in it something I knew. The specific expression of someone doing rapid arithmetic and arriving at a number they don't like. Renata's second attorney began performing grief. He mentioned the family's suffering. He mentioned the complexity of the estate process. He mentioned reconciliation. He was still mentioning it when my attorney placed the trust documentation, tabbed and indexed, in front of each person in the room. I waited until it was quiet. Then I said, "The key is for the box." The box was registered in Margit's name and mine. She told me at the end to make it count. I picked up the key. I held it for a moment. Then I set it back down. He was proud of her, I said. He was bad at saying it. He said it this way instead. Renata looked at the key the way people look at things they cannot argue with. The older son looked at the floor. He was the one I watched most carefully. He was the one who had almost spoken at the dinner table. He understood something in that room that the others hadn't arrived at yet. I did not use this against him. I noted it and I let it be. The trust was transferred over the following 90 days. There were legal challenges, two both filed by Renata's attorneys, both dismissed within 60 days. The trust structure was watertight in the specific, boring, beautiful way that 30 years of careful planning produces. I offered Renata a meeting before the first dismissal. I offered to discuss a voluntary settlement. Something modest, proportional, goodwill-based. Not because I owed her anything but because I wanted to be the kind of person who offers. She did not take the meeting. She had her attorney send a letter calling the trust a deliberate act of familial cruelty. The document she sent me, through that attorney, was the same document she had sent years earlier demanding I sign away future claims. The one I'd declined in January. She had used that document as a weapon. Now I used it in the judicial summary as evidence that she had prior knowledge of potential competing interests, which undermined her claim of good faith in the estate proceedings. The walnut tree in Buk is still there. The house sold 18 months later when Renata and Chaba relocated. I heard this from no one in particular and confirmed it without interest. The blue china is in my apartment now. I bought it at the estate sale for €240. Fair market value according to the appraiser, which the estate required for any asset transfer. Renata had set the rules. I followed them. My apartment has a large window. In the mornings, the light through it hits the shelf where the blue china sits, and the glaze holds the light for a long moment before letting it go. The jar of apricot jam is on the counter beside it. Margit made it. I'm not sure I'll ever open it. Some things are worth more preserved than consumed. I am good at my work. I was good at it before all of this. I am better at it now. Not sharper exactly, but quieter. More patient. Capable of sitting with an unopened envelope and understanding that what is inside has already happened. And waiting does not change it. And rushing does not change it. And the only thing that matters is that when the moment comes, you are ready and you are right. Margit said, "Make it count." I think about that every morning when I put on my coat. If this story sat with you, share it with someone who's been waiting. Leave a comment. Subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. This channel exists for the people who do the quiet work and outlast the noise. I'll see you in the next one.